Okay, we are now live with our Ask the Owners Strategy Planning for 2025 workshop. You have myself, Ann Cotter, Justin Curley, and Chad Spotty here today. So if you are a workshop regular, this one is going to be a little bit different from our norm. We don't have like a full presentation or anything like that planned. It's really just going to be kind of an open discussion. So I have a bunch of questions prepared for Justin and Chad talking about the different categories that you probably saw on the sign up sheet when you filled that out to register for the webinar. So I kind of tailored some of the questions around the categories that everybody chose. That said, everybody is highly encouraged to ask any question, even if it's unrelated to what we're talking about.
Whoa.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if we're talking about, I don't know, website and you want to ask a question about social media, like, this time is yours. If there's something that you really wanted to get out of this Q&A session, please feel free to share that.
Or if you want to ask Chad why he's got Christmas decorations up before Thanksgiving's even happened, go nuts.
Yeah.
I'll have to bring my wife into the conversation.
Fair.
Yeah, no fall decor at Chad's house. Straight into Christmas.
Straight into Christmas.
This has been a big debate over the past few years. So yeah, that I think is my whole spiel. If you are here, we would love for you to say hello and just let us know so we can see, who is all here. Obviously, you have the three of us. And then I'll also just post this note here to please ask us anything as we go through this. But to not waste any more time, hi, Nicole. Hi, Mark. Say hello down on the center. Hi, Megan. I love when people start talking right away. That makes me feel good. Hi, Aaron.
I love that you're going to respond individually.
I know. I'm like watching. Okay. All right. I got to stop at some point. All right. Let's start with strategic planning. So we're going to break this into 3 different sessions or sections. Strategic planning. So kind of just big picture talking points about planning your 2025 strategy. Then we'll talk more about lead generation channels, and we will end on website development. Like I said before, if you have a question that's not related to one of those 3 things, or we're talking about one of those 3 things, but you have this question in another area, please don't hold back. Feel free to chime in. There's also a private chat. So if there's anything that, I don't know, you don't want your name being associated with the question, but you still want to ask the question, you can use that too. We'll check that as well. All right. So starting with strategic planning, I'm going to start very high level and ask, what are the key components that should go into a marketing strategy? And I'll start with you, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, obviously, that goes into it. I think some of the core components, I think first and foremost, you need to understand what your strengths are, how you're going to market, why people choose you is kind of how I phrase it. And it's a lot of a conversation that we have with when we're onboarding clients is just, why would somebody choose you over the competitor? Then, once you kind of have that solidified, then you can start to figure out, okay, who is my audience and who do I want to get in front of? And then to marry those 2 together, it's then what is the message? So we know who we want to get in front of. We know what we do really well. How do we communicate that effectively? And then where the tactics start to come in, that's the promotion of that message. So finding out where your audience is, where do they do their research? Where do they kind of hang out, for lack of a better term? And then how can you use different channels in order to get that message in front of those people where they're at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add to that just building your ICP2 and building your ideal customer profile. Who is your audience, and just kind of researching what their pain points are, what channels are they spending time, and you kind of touched on that too. But just really thinking about that, and if there's any even verticals or segments of your audience that going into 2025 you want to kind of hit a little harder, thinking about those things too.
Yeah, and I think that's a key component too. I think when you try to market to everybody, you end up kind of marketing to nobody. So I think being able to really focus on, whether it's a product or service that you're offering and really hammer that home, or a specific industry or job title that you're going after, something along those lines to give your marketing some focus. Because again, there's a million reasons why somebody might use you, but you really need to narrow it down in order to market your message effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, it within our respective industries and companies, we all have a pretty good idea who our ideal customer is, but actually getting together and talking about that really uncovers new things and things that you may, you know, have not realized, new perspectives, all that sort of stuff. And we've been thick in planning for Top Floor, just in general, and we have a pretty good understanding of who our ideal customer is. And certainly, Justin and I have been here for a long time, and can speak to that. But just getting other people in the room and kind of talking about it, new things come up, and your customer is always changing as well.
Mhm. Yeah, that kind of leads me into my next question which is what research or discussion needs to happen before you build your strategic plan. And I think sitting everyone down in a room and just talking about your audience, and seeing kind of what insights other departments might have, can be really important at the start of all of this too.
Yeah, definitely.
I think talking to your accounts team, your sales team, what kind of questions are coming up, what changes are they seeing in the market, and then how can you help your customers meet those challenges and meet those changes. So I think talking to your accounts team is a vital part, because I think as an owner, sometimes we can be 1, 2, maybe even 3 levels removed from the actual like touch points and things that are happening. So again, we have something set in our mind from when we were the account managers, both Chad and I, that's how we started. But you know, a lot's changed in those last 10 plus years. So being able to hear from that team, and making sure that you're not using an antiquated message, you're not missing the mark, you're not selling something that was a challenge 5 years ago and is kind of obsolete or not as big of a problem these days.
Definitely.
What about like industry research? Is that something that either of you would recommend as you kind of go into this strategy building process, looking at like market research or industry research?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's where that focus comes in. So making sure that you understand that industry's challenges, that industry's problems, who works in it, and what are they trying to accomplish. I think if you focus on solutions and problems, I think that is 90% of the battle. If you just promote how great you are and your team and your experience and all those things, those are kind of ancillary. Those are nice to haves, I think, more than anything. Is once I know somebody can solve my problem, then I want to know a little bit more about their company and their history and their expertise. So I think being able to dive into a specific industry, understanding the challenges that they're facing, can unlock so many different channels for you and opportunities for you in your marketing channel. It's almost counterintuitive. You think to yourself, well, if I really focus heavily on one thing, I'm only going to be doing that one thing with my marketing, but really it allows you then that freedom to really just hammer home, how does your company help that particular niche? And there's so many different things that you can do with that. Because like I said, when you try to market to everybody, it's like, well, we could do a little bit of this, or we could do that. And you almost get paralyzed by how many things you can do and how many different messages are out there and how many different channels you can use to get out in front of them. We've seen, as we've made it the hard focused on manufacturing, is how that has really unlocked our ability to market ourselves effectively.
Yeah, and you're dealing, in most cases, especially with the clients that we typically work with, you're dealing with finite resources, budget and.
Oh, you're muted. You just switched. Still muted. There you go.
These are, yeah. So you're dealing with finite resources. So, being able to focus those resources on something, it definitely helps, rather than, doing a lot of things not very well. Doing a smaller amount of things and more focused things well can be better.
Yeah. And I feel like it helps you like even refine your focus and messaging in your market. Like for us, for example, we're manufacturers are our target market, but what angles or what messaging is going to resonate best. And I feel like when we do or partner with like the WCMP, for example, to look at their Wisconsin manufacturing report, like it helps us gain insights into how we can better market our products and services, or even adapt our product and services to better serve our customers. So I think that's another really key piece of all this too. Sort of related to kind of audience and your ideal customer profile, what can you do to start building a persona?
Give them a name. It sounds really cheesy. I used to roll my eyes at that. I was like, oh yeah, here's Marty, the manufacturer. But a key component of marketing is to humanize. You're going after people. You're not going after things. So really to kind of help put a face on that is a good starting point. But then, again, your experience is going to be key. Who have you worked with that meets that? So once you start to identify, okay, this is the type of company that we want to go after. This is the job title that we're focused on. You can start to look at your existing customers and say, okay, who kind of fits into that profile? And then you can start to really kind of define, all right, what is their job title? What are their challenges? What do they typically look for in a partner or in a vendor or in a supplier or whatever your industry is just leaning heavily on because you likely have a client or you're like, man, if I just had 50 more of these, we would be killing it. So really start to model that after, everybody's a little different. But if you can kind of capture 80 to 90% of what's similar about them, you're well on your way to a really good and strong buyer persona.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Pick a couple of top clients and really focus on why those are your better clients, why maybe the team enjoys working with them, how they came to you, all that sort of stuff, and kind of start there and build around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would also add, we touched on it a little bit, but just customer service teams or customer support teams, the people that are regularly engaging with your customers, whoever that may be, talking to them a little bit too, both for those kind of like model clients, but anyone else too that might be, on the radar too, or part of that ICP. Just asking them, what are you hearing, on a weekly, monthly basis? What are some of the kind of consistent things you're hearing across clients? Where can we kind of, build messaging around pain points or things like that? So I think that's another thing I would recommend doing to help build that persona a little bit. This one can be a tough one. How do I know what area of digital marketing to focus on? Kind of like you mentioned a little bit ago, Chad, a lot of marketing teams are small and have finite resources. So essentially, this is kind of where do I start or how do I know what to focus on? So I'll start with you, Justin, for this.
Start with research. You kind of audit the industry that you're in, look at your competitors and people that you kind of feel have a similar focus. So again, if you decide to focus on a particular industry, who else is kind of hammering that home? And the purpose there is not to just copy them, but it's to see what are they doing, what channels are they utilizing, kind of where are they investing their money, and then you can kind of make that determination of, okay, are they doing it poorly and I could do it better, so maybe I'll use that same channel, or have they saturated it so heavily I need to kind of change my focus and focus on some other channels. So I think once you look at the competition, you look at the industry that you're in, you'll start to get a better picture of what channels are available to you and where are your opportunities. It's kind of like a mini SWOT analysis. Again, if you want to get really in depth, you can do that by all means, but you kind of need to understand, okay, why. We talked about why do people choose you over the competition. You kind of also need to understand why do people choose the competition over you, and then how do you bridge that gap? How do you make that change? And then what channel is going to be the most effective? Is it going to be video? Is it going to be paid search? Is it going to be social media? What does it look like to get your message out effectively?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the question you asked previous, which was personas and identifying those personas, what channels are going to resonate most with them, go where they are kind of a thing. And then also maybe just taking a look at holistically, what have you tried in the past? What things haven't you tried? Ultimately just doing kind of an audit in general of everything that you have going on. And then that can help guide you as to maybe the most effective channel, what's going to, resonate the most with your target audience.
Definitely. We just had a question come in from Nicole. We have used Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, but are not seeing any engagement on Twitter. Is it even worth it to keep using Twitter or X, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, more and more I'm hearing from other marketers that they're kind of ditching the platform. I think a lot of them are kind of under the impression that it's a lot of bot activity, if any activity happens at all. I've always found, just even historically, that the channel is a little bit challenging. It seems to be a little bit more of the moment, and less kind of evergreen. And that's not to say that Facebook and LinkedIn are exactly the same way, but those platforms, I think, lend themselves a little bit better to some more evergreen, some more disruptive. I think when I look at why I used to use X and I quit, I'm a recovering Twitter addict. What I was there for was baseball news, marketing news, what's happening in the industry, what's happening now. And frankly, a lot of us aren't in that industry. We're not, there's a lot of things that are happening in marketing, and yes, that's something that I can do. But what I found is I'm engaging with other marketers, which, if that's my goal, is great. But my target audience wasn't really there, because manufacturers, new and improved and cutting edge, isn't always top of mind. It's how are we going to make sure that our processes are effective? How are we going to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the industry, and especially industries that don't change a whole heck of a lot unless a new regulation comes in. But you usually aren't learning about that on Twitter, and if you are, you might be a little bit behind the curve.
Very niche.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not uncommon for you to see it. So I think what you might want to just take a look at is, do we feel like our target audience is there? And if the answer is yes, then do we have a challenge with our messaging? Like, are we just not putting out content that's engaging enough, or engaging the way that X engages or Twitter engages? But if the answer is, I don't really know if my audience is there, then I think your time and resources are probably better spent focusing on those other two platforms, especially if you're getting engagement there. There's no reason to be on X if you're getting good engagement on other platforms.
I would add to that too, like, even if your audience is there, are they expecting to see you there? Like, I'm thinking about, like, if I'm scrolling on Instagram, or I don't use Twitter, but similar thing. If I'm Justin and I'm on Twitter, like, trying to get sports updates, I'm not like expecting or thinking about work or what task I need to accomplish at work. So I think that's another thing to consider too. Like, maybe your audience really is there, but is it the right time to engage with them or interact with them? Might be something else to think about too.
Yeah, good point.
Great question. All right. I want to move on to lead generation, just for the sake of time. Any other questions that came up while we were talking about planning or strategy building? I'll let you all type if you need to. We'll move on, but I'll jump around and check questions as we go. Lead generation. First and foremost, what is lead generation? What might that include or look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're focused on digital marketing. So, I mean, what we're looking at there is kind of how effective is our digital presence. And 95% of the time we're talking about a website, but it could be your social channel. It could be your Google My Business page. It really kind of depends on where you're at there. But how effective is that platform at capturing leads? Are we getting our message out there through organic search means? Are we paying for ads to drive people to our website? And then how effective is our website at capturing it? So you can call it lead capture, you can call it lead generation, you can get into demand generation, which is some people don't know about you at all and how do you get out there. But it's really just how effective is your digital channel at getting people to reach out, get them to ask for more information, get them to ask for quotes, ask for advice, and whatnot.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question. I was like, where does lead generation like really start? You know what I mean? It's like someone might not even know they have a problem when they are first introduced to you, and it might take a while for them to even realize that they have a problem, or that you might be someone to talk to or a solution. For a while, it could just be knowing you, building trust, or just thinking like, oh, XYZ, they know everything about whatever it is you do or whatever product or service you offer, so that you are top of mind when that problem or scenario does arise where you might be needed. Because yeah, it starts really early, and it doesn't necessarily start when someone's in market, like starting right now, like I need to solve this problem too?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think-
kind of.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
I was just gonna say it starts differently for everybody. I mean, there's gonna be people
Right.
who are like, man, I know I've got a problem. I need it fixed yesterday. I'm gonna do a Google search and find somebody, or I'm gonna pick up a phone and talk to somebody that I know had the same problem. You know, whatever it is, it could start there, or it could start like you said, Ann, like they don't even know they have a problem. So being able to kind of create some awareness. So really understanding the different stages of the buying process, and is your website effective at capturing that attention? So is it good at generating awareness for those people who are like, I don't even know about you guys at all. I don't know that I have a problem. I don't know that there's a solution out there. I'm very ignorant. Or if it's like, hey, maybe I know I have a problem, but I don't know, do I need, I'll use Topfloor as an example because we're familiar with it. But, we help companies generate leads. We help them, generate revenue through lead capture and digital marketing. But from a problem perspective, it's just, hey, I need more sales. I need more revenue. So potential solutions out there are anything from hiring a new sales rep, hiring a appointment setter, investing in digital marketing, all these different things that can lead to that final solution. How do I make sure that my solution is the one that gets in front of them? Because again, they know they have a problem. How do I make sure that mine's out there? And then, like I said, that final kind of piece of, I know I have a problem. I know who can fix it for me. How do you make it easy for them to reach out to you? How do you make it easy for them once they do reach out to you? Are you following up with them effectively? And really kind of pushing them down that sales process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know there's a statistic that's like you research like 3 to 7 companies as you're doing your kind of decision-making process or your buying decision-making. And if even before you're in that part of the funnel, you're already someone that your customer's aware of, you're automatically going to be part of that like 3 to 7, They're not just starting from scratch necessarily when it comes to you, because they've already interacted with you, engaged with you, already know who you are.
Yeah, and that's, I think when you said it's really hard to like nail down where it starts and where it ends, it is. And I think for me, it's like it starts with your brand and the strategy around your brand, and so that you are, top of mind, like when they're going to pick those 7 or what you were just saying, and that you have a really strong brand identity and all that sort of stuff, and then all the way through, not just generating those leads, but then like Justin was talking about, how do you nurture them through the funnel, and ultimately how do you get those leads to convert, and then what happens after that lead converts, is there kind of follow-up things that you can do to try to upsell and all those sort of things. So it's the whole thing, and it's hard to nail down. Yeah, I mean, it's one big giant circle, right?
Yeah, pretty much. This is kind of like, I don't know that there's an actual real answer to this question, but what would you say is the most effective lead generation channel? I feel like this is something that we get asked, so we can answer it, even though there isn't a clear answer for that.
I'm not biased at all, but it's definitely organic search. That's the most effective channel. For those of you who don't know me, that was my background. But I do think that, again, things like AI and obviously even their own ad platforms within there, it always comes up, SEO's dead, blah, blah, blah. We still see that it's an extremely effective channel because it is evergreen. It doesn't change, it's your website's content and its ability to rank and get in front of people when they're searching for solutions to their problems. So, it's one of those things where it's like, it doesn't cost money, but it does. It takes time and effort and some care and all this research that we've talked about, understanding your audience and the challenges that they are and how do you talk to them and make sure that they understand that your solution is going to work for them. But it kind of keeps coming back to that. But really, when you do that audit, you're going to understand where you exist within your industry. And the most effective channel for you might be paid search, because you do need to get your name out there. You do need to make sure that people are seeing you as a valid option against kind of the bigger competitors or the more established brands, if that's where you're at in the journey. Or if you are a very established brand, organic search and kind of direct traffic, things from referrals and word of mouth and that type of stuff can be very effective channels for you. So it can affect your strategy. And how do I then capture that and make sure that when people do start to do their research, maybe we get referred by other people, those people are still going to do research. So does my website effectively capture them? Does it create a good first impression? Do they feel like we're a valid partner and that we can solve their problems? Are my reviews solid online? Those kind of things where, it really depends on where you are in the market, as far as what's kind of going to be the most effective channel for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's hard to say one channel is better than another channel. I think if you just focus on, if you're going to focus on one thing and you're just trying to figure out, what your strategy is, I think it should be around ultimately your messaging and your content, because those are going to
Mhm.
play into all those different channels. So if you think paid search in your industry is going to be the most effective channel, or LinkedIn is going to be the most effective channel, if you don't have really strong, message and really strong content to support what you're putting out there, and have somewhere, where people can come to either solve their problem or, answer their questions, learn about your company, then it's all for naught anyways. So I think starting there, and usually for us, that boils down to your website, but I think it can be just the overall kind of messaging and content strategy on your
Mhm.
website and what you're pushing out there.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And
Um,
channels may change too. I mean, what we usually tell people, and this has been the case for quite a while, is that organic search is going to be the largest, I guess, channel market share wise. Like that's where the most people are going to be coming from, usually, especially for the clients that we work with. So I think focusing your efforts on making sure that's really buttoned up, I guess, would be, if you're going to start somewhere, to answer the question that way, that's where I would ultimately look at to start. But I think even that is so tied in with content and content strategy and messaging strategy that I would even go a step back and say focus on that first, and then it'll help everything else.
yeah, just like a domino effect from there. That makes sense.
Right.
I don't know if you can consider like the website a channel in and of itself. I would say that is also kind of tied with SEO and the content. That's the hub of all of that. That's where um, people are landing, and that's just half the battle. Like just because they're on your website does not mean that that the job is done and that they've converted. Like that still needs to be a place that nurtures your audience, that resonates with them. That's where your messaging, your content comes into play. Do the keywords that you're targeting make sense for what they see and what they get on your website? So maybe that's cheating a little bit. But if you were going to start with like one channel, I'd also think itself is a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because what you want to avoid in marketing is kind of any moment of doubt. So let's use paid search as an example. So if I do a search and I see an ad, the copy is really strong, I feel like it's going to solve my problem, I click on it, and then I'm taken to a website that's either outdated or maybe it's an irrelevant page on the website. I'm like, wait a minute, did I click on the right thing? And then maybe I go back to that Google search and then I click on the next one because I was confused by what happened when I clicked that link. So those are the kind of things where, if you don't have a really strong website or foundation, some of these marketing efforts can be in vain. There's no benefit to doing them if you're going to take them to a place that's confusing or outdated or doesn't have the right content on it or messaging to it that speaks to me as your target client.
Yeah, definitely. We just got another question from Jillian. What are you seeing as an effective strategy to reach the new generation of manufacturers?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it's still content,
Mhm.
but I think what we need to make sure that we understand is how do they consume that content.
Mhm.
So no longer, is it just long articles and technical documents? I mean, I think those are still key pieces, but do we need to start to incorporate video? Or do we need to make sure that it's more visual? Because, again, this newer generation has been inundated with digital, so they're very digital savvy, but they've also just been inundated with video, with iPad. I hate to call them
Mhm.
iPad kids because I feel like that's derivative, but like it's been so ingrained in their way of life that you see them constantly. Like, look at my nephews who are in their early 20s, and like they're always looking at videos. Even if it's on Reddit, there's videos that they're watching that are kind of explaining different things to them. So I think that's going to be a key component to a lot of strategies moving forward. Is how do we make sure that the content that we're developing is getting in front of that right audience? And again, it comes down to the research of it all. So if you have those new generation, maybe they're stepping into decision-making roles within your current customers. take some time to ask them, you know, hey, how do you consume content? Like when you've got a challenge at work, what do you do? Because then you already have an existing relationship, and you have an in to kind of ask them and do some, you know, call it market research light. And then again, then you can kind of understand, like, all right, how is this shifting from what I've done traditionally? And then I wouldn't say make all of your decisions based off of one conversation, but it's at least worth then testing to say, okay, maybe let's put out a couple of videos and see how those, are we seeing good engagement with them? You know, are we getting in front of the right people, that type of stuff, before you just say, okay, everything's shifting to video. And that's where we got to be. So yeah, it's all about understanding your audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Gillian. And I think the thing for me is that the next generation is familiar with the technologies that, you know, we maybe, you know, speaking of me, Justin, and Anne's a little bit younger than us, but like we had a period of time where we ultimately didn't have the internet, or it was very early on, or we didn't have YouTube and those other kind of information sources. Things weren't as readily available and right at our fingertips as it is, or as it has been to the newer generation of kind of people coming up into those, you know, positions in purchasing and that sort of stuff within manufacturing companies. And so I think just making sure that answers to questions and information is easy to find and readily available, so that they don't have to hunt for it or search for it. They can find it in an instant. And then also just being able to have like a overall approach so that you're in front of them at every step in the process. You know, don't make them work for finding you, or work to find you, or work to find your product or your service or your solution. Make it easy.
Mm-hmm. I would add as one last thing, some level of like personalization too, because when I think of, you know, the algorithm on TikTok or Instagram, you're getting served content that is so personalized to you and based on what you engage with and interact with. And I think the younger generation is so accustomed to that, to like their digital universe being like tailor made to them in a lot of ways. So
Absolutely.
I think that too, when you're thinking about how you engage with the younger generation, and maybe you decide you want to use one of those channels, maybe just starting with from like a company culture type of content there or something like that. But the main point is that whether you're following up through email or other channels, to have some level of personalization, don't just bucket them into a general group of people that showed interest or might be interested, but really tailor that experience for them too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I think to that point too, the content that you create needs to feel native to that platform. Don't just create one image, let's say that's an image ad, and then plaster it across all channels, because every channel is going to be a little different. How you engage with something on Instagram is going to be wildly different than how you do in a search bar or on a website that serves ads. So making sure that if that is a channel that you need to get in front of, you determine your audience is there, that it feels like it's part of it. The messaging is there. It doesn't feel disruptive. And I see a lot of companies that are doing it really well. And unfortunately, I see a lot of companies that do it poorly, where they just like, nope, here's our video and this is what works on YouTube, so it's definitely going to work on TikTok. And that's just, it's not the case.
Yeah. And I think that even goes beyond marketing channel, just like with your information and kind of content, product data, like in general. I'm not smart enough to know what replaces a website in the future, but obviously, you know, there was a period of time where we didn't have websites, right? They weren't a thing. And I'm sure there's a period of time in the future where there's something else beyond a website, some sort of a metaverse, augmented I don't know, whatever it is, right? But
Put your
being
glasses
like,
back on and maybe you'll figure it out.
yeah. But to say
Now
more
he's
on
smart,
that,
now he's smart enough.
I got it.
but being ready for that, like setting yourself up for that in the future. So like having your information maybe, you know, decentralized and starting to think about that versus, you know, having your one like source of truth for everything, starting to think about that and how you can, again, like Justin said, be able to kind of tailor your information, your content to that channel, but also to, you know, go where those people are and start to kind of plan for that.
Yeah, and I think as I think about those platforms, I think when you look at who gets the engagement, it's people. So I think personal branding becomes much more influential. So being able to put yourself out there, we'll use the term thought leader, but getting yourself out there and putting a face to it is going to be much more effective than just posting to your company channel. Because again, especially when we're talking about social media, company related content doesn't get engaged with as much, doesn't get promoted as much, doesn't get shared as much as when it does come from a person. So that's what they're looking for. It sounds counterintuitive again because you're on social media and you're by yourself sitting on a couch with a phone in front of your face, but you are looking for a personal connection. This is a person that I can trust. I'm going to reach out to them, or I'm going to engage with their content when I'm ready. So taking the time to maybe think to yourself, okay, who on my team can be that face? Is it the owner? Is it the CEO? Is it head of sales? Who is it that we can kind of funnel our marketing content through, so that we can put a face on it and make it a little bit easier for them to put themselves out there as a thought leader and as an influencer. I'll use that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And you use the word influencer there, but like look to B2C and those types of like companies and the marketing going on there. And eventually that stuff, those tactics trickle down to the manufacturing world. And I think, we went to the assembly trade show down in Rosemont a month ago, whatever it was. But 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen people walking the floor and like interview. You wouldn't have seen these like manufacturing influencers or content creators or podcast hosts, all that sort of stuff. And that's all, it's kind of like that's all become the norm now, or starting to be the norm in the manufacturing world, which is a little bit behind, what I would say like the B2C or more traditional or forward thinking.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? So like, look to that as an indicator as to what's to come in the manufacturing industry as well.
Yeah, really good point. We have a little less than 10 minutes left. So we're going to talk now about website design and development. But again, feel free to ask anything that we've talked about so far or any website questions that you have. But first question, and now I think, Chad, you'll probably be leading a lot of the answers to this because this is kind of your area.
Bye, everybody. I'm going to take off.
Hi, Justin. Justin knows some things too, but okay. First question. Say I am planning for a new website in 2025. Where do I start? What kind of information should I start gathering?
Well, you start, email me. No, I'm just kidding. I guess, you start by making sure you're tracking what's happening now. And this is just, I'm assuming that you probably have a website now if you're looking to build a new website, unless you're a completely new company, or a new brand or a new product launch or something like that may be different. But track what you can while you're planning for the new website. I think that's usually one of the first things we do when we're talking with a prospect, who typically, someone will have like a Google Analytics or something like that set up on a website, but go a step further and start tracking just like how user behavior is happening on the website. Survey your customers, gather as much information as you can as to how the current website is meeting the needs of your customers, or in most cases not meeting the needs of your customers, your audience, so that you can kind of build on that. And then I think, start with yourself and then start looking at competition for sure. So what are those key competitors? You can try to limit it maybe 3 to 5 and start looking at, what are they doing well? What are they doing poorly? What areas can you win in when you're building a new website? All that sort of stuff from a competition standpoint.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend including in like an RFP? So if you are ready to look for a vendor, start kind of going down this process, what are the kinds of things that you should include in that RFP while you're sending those out?
Yeah. First, I would say, put together the high level information of the project. Obviously, what are you looking to accomplish? I think goals is something that I don't see a lot of times in RFPs. It's more like, hey, we need a website. It's this many pages or something along that. Like, what are the goals of the new project? And then I've only had this happen in my 12 years of doing this, probably maybe 3 or 4 times where the company submitting the RFP actually asked for like assistance on the RFP itself, which is kind of a weird thing to think about because as the agency, you know that that's going to go out to other people, but also you have kind of the inside track because you're helping to formulate the RFP, but then you're actually getting, the questions in that RFP that you think or that need to be answered in order to provide the estimate. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And those projects where that did happen, a couple of them we ended up working on, a couple of them they went with someone else, but at least they had all the information up front to make the decision because they asked the people that were doing the work or that were going to be doing the work, like, what information do you think we should include, versus just them coming up with it on their own.
Yeah, and one thing I might actually add to this, and I've rarely, if ever, seen it, but I think the more I think about it, I feel like is a key component of it is to set up your expectations from a communication standpoint. I think one of the things that if you don't put that in upfront and you don't set those expectations kind of at the forefront, when we quote a project out, we're quoting it using our process. Where are the touch points? Where are the communication points? And if that doesn't align with what you're expecting, you're kind of starting the relationship off on a rocky foot. So I think being able to say, okay, here's what we expect from a communication frequency or media, do I want email? Do I want meetings? And then who's going to be involved in all those? Because then that'll help us to understand, what needs to be presented and when. We work with a lot of marketing people on these RFPs, but then they need to then present to C-suite. So how can we then prepare the marketing people to present, whether it's a web design, it's a development functionality, whatever, so that they can effectively communicate it to their C-suite or their boss to effectively say, here's how it meets our needs and our requirements. So I think communication in any marketing engagement or partnership is key, but I think it's often left off in RFPs because the focus is so on what does my end product need to look at and not what are the steps along the way to get me to that end product.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we got a question from Zach. In terms of SEO and traffic, when launching a new site, it seems to be widely known that a dip in numbers and statistics will happen. But is there a way to prevent that as much as possible? And what is an expected time frame to return to normal? I think pass that to Justin.
Yeah, I can start. I think the biggest thing is making sure that you have a vendor that has a track record of doing this effectively. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we run into a lot is somebody who launches a new website and is like, hey, it's been 6 months and it hasn't turned around. And then we kind of dive in and do some triage on that. So, things like redirects are incredibly important. Where did my content exist previously? Where does it exist on my new website? Understanding if you do decide like, hey, maybe there's a huge section of our website that doesn't really serve our target customer anymore. It's outdated. We're going to cut it. You need to be able to understand up front to say, okay, we're cutting off maybe 10% of our traffic. But we know that going into the project saying, hey, our recovery might only look like 90%. And that's okay. That's
don't be afraid to lose bad traffic. I think that's something that I always tell people as well. Like focus on the conversions and set that, from a marketing person standpoint on the client side, like set those expectations early on that just because visits look like they're going to be down or, whatever metrics you're looking at, that's not the end all be all.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of key components for every website that can have significant impacts on traffic. It's content, it's the content management system you're using, it's the URL that you're using, and then potentially even the domain. So minimizing how you roll those out. So if you do decide, hey, we need to change all 4 of these to move to where we need to go, don't do them all at once. Figure out a phased approach. Do we switch domains today so that we can start to build some authority and say, okay, we are now known as, maybe we're rebranding. We're now known as this. We have our existing website to exist for 6 months while we kind of recover from that. Then we launch our new website with new content and new structure. So being able to phase those things out can avoid kind of that Armageddon of all of a sudden there's a brand new website at a brand new domain with totally different content than what you had before. and then recovery might never happen.
Yeah.
So understanding what those changes are. And as far as your question about timeline, again, if you're doing all of these things, I'd say 3 months, you should start to see things moving in the right direction, if not fully recovered. And by 6 months, you should know, hey, we got a serious problem here or not. Because if it takes any longer than that, and you didn't do all 4 of those things at the same time, there might be something else that's happening in the market or with your site that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big red flag, which I haven't seen this in a little while, but is if when launching that new website, your agency is setting you up with like a new Google Analytics account or property, and they're just kind of wiping the slate clean. That's something to consider.
How do you
there.
compare then? Yeah.
Yeah, how do you compare? And ultimately, it's not the way you want to do it.
Yeah.
And there are valid reasons for starting from scratch, but it's usually related to, hey, I don't have access to this account anymore because it was set up by somebody who retired 10 years ago, and there's no chance I'd ever get a hold of them again. Whatever. But if it's just, hey, no, I've got access, I can put the new, our existing account on the new website, and they're like, no, we're going to start it from scratch. That tells me that they probably want to make sure that you're not looking at old stats when it comes to the new website.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think it's, go ahead.
Nope, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, it's a tricky question to answer because it feels like it depends situation too, based on how many changes you're going to make with the new website, like how much you're cutting out or leaving in. But I really like the point that both of you have kind of touched on, that pay attention to maybe better metrics than just traffic overall, like conversion rate or even keywords. Like if you have a really strong keyword ranking for a set of keywords that are highly relevant to your business, I would pay more attention. Like, are we maintaining that ranking for these really important keywords than just traffic overall? Like, just keep it focused, on the things that are really matter to your business versus just everything.
Yeah. And if you do it right, and you have, the expertise level in all those different areas, not just on the organic search side, but on the development side. So the behind the scenes, everything is set up in the right way, and schema markup and all that sort of stuff is set up the right way. Like you should see positive results from the launch of that website right away. Now, if you're solely focused on traffic, then maybe you do see a slight dip and it's not positive for you. But if you are focused on the right metrics, like it should be positive, whether it's increases in conversion rate, increases in, other things. Ultimately, the collective data should be positive.
Definitely. All right.
And that's actually the question itself brings up going back to the, what to ask in an RFP or what to look for in an agency partner. And I've only had this happen a few times too, where someone asked me, what do you think could go wrong in this project? And asking that agency partner can reveal a lot about the agency and ultimately, what they're worried about in the project and what those risks are. And I've only had people ask that a couple of times, and I thought that was a really good question.
Yeah. Use the RFP as an opportunity. Kind of what you were saying too, Justin, is not just a chance to get your technical specifications down and what you need from that end, but what do you need from a relationship management type of angle? What are you looking for in a partner in this project? Like those are equally, if not more, sometimes important than just here's what we need or here's the budget we're working within. Those are huge aspects as well.
And like speaking for Top Floor, we're gonna do our due diligence, and obviously I'm biased as the owner of Top Floor, but we're pretty good at uncovering all of the technical aspects of the project, especially from your current website. How many pages there are, what is the structure of categories, what's the functionality and how do we build it out? Like that stuff will come out in the discovery process for putting together the estimate regardless. Like we'll get all that. So don't spend all your time trying to list out all those things. Focus on those more high level questions about the partnership, about what are your work style, who am I going to be working with on the team? Can I meet the project manager that might be assigned to this project? Because at the end of the day, there's a number of agencies out there that can be successful in helping you with this project, but you're going to have to work with that agency, not only on the project, but probably long-term to help support the website and marketing after it launches. Do you want to work with those people?
Yeah. Excellent point. And thanks for the shout out, Zach. We are happy to help you. All right, we are at 10:51. This is supposed to go till, or was until 10:45. But I see people are still here. So if you have more questions, please ask them. In the meantime, I guess I'll ask one final question. But please ask away in these last few minutes if you have any other questions. And that is, if you're not planning for a website, but you know that your website might need a little bit of work or need a little bit of help, what are some ways? Oh, I might just actually cancel my question because another one just came in. And I want you guys to ask the questions, not me. Okay, so that can be a later thing. Mark asks, you mentioned that marketing audits can help identify where your marketing dollars should go. Can you talk about that audit process and what I could expect at the end?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and every audit's going to be different, so we can really only speak to our process. So really during that, we've talked about trying to understand kind of where you exist today in the market, what your website does well, what it maybe struggles at, where are some opportunities and things like that. When we put the audit together, it's not just a list of, hey, here's your strengths, here's your weaknesses. We really do want to look at, okay, from here, how do we get you to point B? That's essentially, everybody knows where they want to be. It's always, how do I get there? So we start to put together recommendations on channels. We start to put together recommendations on timeframes and budgets, both for you to take the audit and be able to kind of execute it on yourself. We kind of create what we call a roadmap to say, hey, here's where you are today and here's where you go. But then if you need some help and you need work from a partner, obviously, again, we're biased. We think we're pretty great at it, but we'll put together, what does this look like if you need to partner with us in order to put together not only just what needs to happen, but when does it happen? What results do we expect from it? And what do we move forward? So that's kind of what you should expect from an audit. I think a lot of times it's just kind of a laundry list of here's all the problems. And then it's like, okay, well, if I fix them, what happens? It's never really a kind of a look at the future of, all right, yes, that's where I am now. I know what my problems are. What are the steps I need to take in order to fix them? And that's what we try to incorporate with our roadmap and our kind of next steps when it comes to an audit.
Yeah,
Definitely.
We have another question from Dan. What is your take on integrating AI into a refreshed or new website development project?
Do it. No, I mean, not to answer, I think every time an answer comes up and it depends, I always say the same thing, like, not to answer the question with it depends, but it does. It depends. I mean, it depends on what you're talking about integrating that AI to do. If you're talking about using AI to help with organizing product data, creating content, making other kind of back-end integrations work, that sort of stuff, like yes, do all that sort of stuff. If it's like using an AI website builder and kind of just trying to spin up a website in a matter of minutes, it's not there yet, in my opinion. I think there's too many other factors that go into a website project, and we've talked a lot about them today. It's not just take this thing, build these pages, have the design look good. You need to consider things like personas, journey map of those personas. Like, there's a lot of different things that go into a successful website build. But the more you can use it to help reduce the amount of time and resources to get that project from start to finish, the better. And especially on the content side of it.
Yeah, and I'm on our internal AI committee, and we spend a lot of time kind of understanding what technologies are kind of in the pipeline and stuff like that. And I think one thing I'll caution is if you're talking about integrating AI in the form of like a chat bot or something along those lines, making sure that you vet those tools appropriately. If you're just kind of letting raw AI kind of handle the customer interactions, you got to understand that this is an extension of your brand, and there are things that they call in the industry hallucinations, but essentially it's AI just making shit up that you don't necessarily want. I mean, we've seen some horror stories in the healthcare industry where they're just making just wild recommendations to people to help kind of fix their things, or making up doctor's offices that don't exist when people are looking for places to go. So really making sure that you understand how much freedom does this AI tool have to interact with my customers, and is that an acceptable level of risk? Obviously, those are some extreme examples within healthcare, and if we're in manufacturing, it might not be as dire, but it is still an extension of your brand, and that's going to be an interaction that customer is going to remember. But yeah, to Chad's point, if it's just to help you along the way, so that you can make things a little bit more efficient and help kind of get a project from start to finish, there are some advantages to it. But again, it doesn't replace, in my mind, people, and I think that's what I think so many people are thinking it's going to do, and I don't know that it's there yet, or if it ever will be there, because AI just doesn't have the experience. It doesn't have the knowledge that you have, and you can put as many documents in front of it. You can give it as much access to the internet as possible, and it's still going to fall short from somebody who's actually worked in the industry, has seen projects in action, and being able to answer those questions. But if you just need something that can look through your technical documents and find any instance of a particular product that they're looking for a manual for, awesome, absolutely integrate that in there. But if it's like, hey, I've got a problem and I'm going to let AI figure out the solution to it, that's where I might want to pump the brakes a little bit.
Yeah. And I would add, like, especially looking at your target market and what they're expecting from a customer relationship standpoint, typically in the manufacturing industry, they're expecting more of that one-to-one communication and personalized approach. So replacing your customer support or something like that with a bot is probably, not going to look great for your brand. It might work for like an e-commerce B2C website, but probably we're not there yet.
Yeah. And honestly,
All right.
a lot of the chatbots that are out there right now are just a very advanced sequence of if and then statements. It's like, if somebody asks for this and there's an article, send them a link to it. If that doesn't exist, ask for more information, or, those kind of things where it's like, it's really kind of just mindlessly working down a task list. And that's, I'm not saying that derogatorily. I think that's what it needs to be, until we get to a point where AI can then truly kind of think, I hate to say think for itself, but be able to come up with creative solutions that make sense.
Definitely. All right. Well, we definitely went over time, but I see a lot of people stayed. So, we're happy to keep talking about this stuff. We do have to wrap up now, but thank you everyone for joining. I think we could have probably gone into each of these segments for like a full 45 minutes or beyond. So if you liked this format or you found it helpful to have this kind of Q&A time, let us know. We can definitely try to do more of these. And yeah, I think that's all I have. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad, for your
everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.